Best of r/Tales from Tech Support episode 37. Let's keep this one short. I was briefed from our support about a customer's issue. It was a known issue to me and the fix is not complicated, so getting everything running should be no problem at all. So an online meeting was set up with two from our company, me and the guy responsible for the customer, and two techs from the customer. So far everything was almost 100% normal. Almost, since the customer was located in Austria and I am in Germany. A tiny issue when it comes to locating a resource since it's a cross-country charging that needs to happen, but that's not a big deal. The big deal was another one, and it was one I didn't expect when calling another German-speaking country. It was a language barrier, and we are not talking about the differences between Semmel, Weck and Brötchen, all mean bread roll in German, but for different regions. But a complete 100% local dialect with a strict aversion to High German, Hochdeutsch, that's official German. The customer only talked the local dialect, and I lost them about right after the high. Heck, even with my Egyptian customers I am understanding more if they talk their tongue, since they don't translate the technobabble and leave IT words in there I can use to reconstruct the meaning. But those folks, they only spoke local dialect and I wasn't even able to extract some one word from them like san, db, search, server. Anyway, this meeting lasted about an hour and it was the most confusing meeting I had ever. I was waiting for breaks so I could get my information out there and wait for another break so I could spool off my action plan. After an hour that killed me mentally, the system was back up and running, but I had no clue what was said in the meeting. I talked later to the other guy in my company and he told me I didn't sounded like a fool at all during the meeting, since my remarks were always on cue even without any clue what the feedback were, and he had a great time during the meeting since he enjoyed my cries for help on the side chat. Thank you. Next. TL. Doctor, I'm not even going to try and make this helpful. Trigger warning, genuinely, parts of this take a somewhat darker tone than my other writings. In fact, it seems to be a theme for this episode. As far as I'm aware, no harm, nothing, actually happened to anybody in the time I was there, but that doesn't mean that was necessarily the intention of all the parties in the story. Not everybody out there is nice, and I'm not just referring to me being rude about $ users here, but there is some levity too. Preface. Once I'd settled in as Inc., I found that one of my duties was to look after the IP. I recommended which of our inventions might be worth the pain and expense of patenting, checked the industry for violations of anything we'd already patented, and went through any new PQR Holdings patents with a fine-tooth comb to see if it could/should be objected to, or b, there was anything to be learnt and applied in another way. IP equals intellectual property, nothing to do with addressing stuff here. As keeper of the IP, I also acted as first line of defense against ideas submitted to the company by third parties, even the ones that might actually work. Being on Enter Patrol was a 24/7 exercise. You never knew when you'd get the call to action. Crank the first. The phone rang. I picked it up and announced myself. Oh, hello, this is Mr. Parkinson. I'm ringing to find out why I haven't heard back from you. I explained that regrettably Mr. Parkinson had the advantage over me, and so I hadn't the faintest fkin idea what he was on about. I sent you details of my invention last week. I was expecting to have signed a contract by now. Again, Mr. Parkinson held the advantage. I had received an unannounced and completely ridiculous technical submission the previous week, but didn't remember Parkinson being associated with it. I had politely declined on my employer's behalf, and then filed the whole lot just out of reach. I indicated the gist of this to Mr. Parkinson, and put the phone down while I retrieved the relevant file. Once I had it open, I was once again able to feast my eyes on the innovations offered by CleverMe Inc., none of which could actually be made, and none of which would have worked if they could. The name on CleverMe's paperwork was Mr. Smith, and that's who I had written back to with my refusal. I'm sorry, Mr. Parkinson. These appear to be someone else's work. I don't see your name anywhere. Perhaps yours is still in the post somewhere. Certainly not. I know you must have it. Tell me about the one you've got in front of you. No, it doesn't have your name on it, and I've got a duty of confidentiality to the inventor, even if we don't decide to pick up their ideas. I just need to check if it's mine. It doesn't have your name on it, Mr. Parkinson. And so it continued for a while. with me declining to give out details of the paperwork to some random nutter who'd rung me. Eventually Mr. Parkinson determined that the only way around the impasse was to describe his idea in all of its somewhat limited detail. That, along with mention of Clever Me Inc., ultimately persuaded me that I was in fact holding his paperwork. 100% match on the unworkable CRP. Who'd have guessed? I queried the fact that he'd announced himself today as Parkinson, and that didn't match the technical portfolio previously sent in and which I'd replied to. Oh, I sometimes use the name Smith for anonymity purposes. I see. I didn't, but I sure as HLL wasn't going to admit it. That was a rabbit hole I had no intention of going down. Well, it certainly seems to have worked. Anyway, I assessed your drawings, and wrote back to you declining your offer on date last week. Oh, I think I got that. I wasn't interested in a rejection by some flunky engineer. Now I can just sort it out with you. That was me who wrote to you. I'm the chief development flunky. Why didn't you pass it up to the board of directors? Because they passed it to me for assessment. That's part of my job, and I assess that nothing you've proposed can actually be made on our machines. Nonsense. You'd hardly need to modify anything at all, and even if you did have to change the machines, it'd easily be worth it. I've been talking to highly unlikely big name brand, and we're already talking about 30-fold increase in technical spec. It should be noted that while they are sometimes used interchangeably, talking about is not in fact a synonym for have developed and shown to actually work. I see. How are you achieving that? Oh, it's easy. You just need to make it out of the same stuff you use in your machines now. We don't use stuff. It wouldn't work if we did. We use. Well, I'm sure it'll work perfectly fine with whatever products are made out of. I'm still not sure I see. If you're going to make this much improved end product out of whatever our existing product is made from, which will now be 30 times better, more than an order of magnitude, when you're using exactly the same material, and when you don't actually seem to know what that is, well, I can certainly tell you that previously mentioned highly unlikely customer were very excited when I talked to them about it, so we should certainly have huge improvement as a major target in our project. I can imagine. I'm going to stand by my previous decision. Thank you for your interest in Ziz Inc., Mr. Parkinson, but I won't be recommending that we take your proposal any further. I really would like to make a personal presentation to someone technical. You have Mr. Parkinson. This was it. Ziz Inc. does not wish to buy any of your ideas off you. Well, that's most disappointing. I have several other pictures I'd like to show you. I'm going to be a particular highway service area on Friday night, about 11:30 or 12. Perhaps you could meet me there and I'll explain things better face to face. No, Mr. Parkinson, I don't think that'll be necessary. Anyway, that's way outside normal hours, and I have a policy of not meeting people at highway service areas unless I already know them, and never at midnight. Asterisk. I did in fact once meet my younger sibling at a specified service area at midnight, but they were somewhat late and words were duly had about this. At the time I didn't feel it necessary to disclose this to Mr. Parkinson. Well, surely you have a marketing department. One of the marketing girls can meet me, and I'll show the pictures to her. FX. Time to exhale. I agreed with Mr. Parkinson that we did have a marketing department, and that some of the people who work there were indeed ladies. I, however, declined to give out names or make any meeting arrangements on their behalf. I indicated again that with the best will in the world, Ziz Inc. did not wish to work with Clever Me Inc., and that nothing was going to change that. Eventually the phone call ended and it was quiet again. I put the file back and sent a brief email copy to everyone in marketing and sales advising them that I'd declined an assignation with Clever Me Inc. on their behalf, and precisely why. Sometime later in the week I had a meeting with marketing assistants to spend an hour or so going over something or other. I can't remember what. I had something like that reasonably often in the normal course of things. In most of these tales, I've gone to some effort to remove identifying data, including the sex of the dramatis personae, but in this case, it's actually vaguely relevant to the tale, so I shall have to tell you. Marketing assistant was female, petite and very pretty. She also had the single dirtiest sense of humor of anyone I've ever met, and a laugh that was well matched to it. After we'd talked about whatever it was the meeting was about, and were into the shooting the breeze part of the agenda, marketing assistant pulled out a copy of my recent email regarding CleverMe Inc. and asked why I'd burdened them with this particular knowledge, when Enter Patrol normally operated in isolation unless she was forwarding me stuff for consideration. So I drew breath and explained the nitty-gritty of the situation so far regarding CleverMe Inc. and Mr. Parkinson to marketing assistant, including the specifics of the desired midnight meetup that I had so hastily declined on her and her colleagues' behalf. That being the main purpose of the email in case CleverMe Inc. rang marketing direct. By a curious coincidence I had $N to file volume 3 with me and was able to show her the drawings and paperwork supplied by CleverMe Inc. We perused the presentation. I thought you said his name was Parkinson. It was when he rang. Apparently he sometimes uses Smith in written materials. Oh, I see. Between you and me, I don't think she did. You'll recall I certainly f***ing didn't. And if the company were foolish enough to send one of these marketing girls to meet him at midnight in a car park in the middle of nowhere, should the girl ask for Parkinson or Smith? Didn't say. Strangely, that was also something I didn't ask. Assuming you can guess who you're supposed to be meeting, how far is particular highway service area, anyway? Asked marketing assistant, with a faint smirk. About an hour and a half each way. You might do it in an hour and quarter that time o' night. Not in my car. This was likely accurate. Marketing assistant was a part-time employee who lived very locally to Ziz Inc. She had plenty of other things to spend money on, and so had adopted a low-cost vehicle buying policy quite similar to one I also had for some of my time there. Some of the Snowbeer senior staff, by a strange coincidence, not one of whom had to actually buy their own transport, they all had company cars, referred to it as car recycling, which to be fair, wasn't entirely inaccurate. I was the last owner of more than one vehicle. That might be true. Marketing assistant cocked her head to one side. Nah, we go to be bed early on a Friday night. My so works Saturday mornings, so I'll be all sweaty by 10 PM anyway. No sense getting dressed again just to go and meet some creep. Thank you for sharing, marketing assistant, but I think you might just be right. That's why I took the liberty of refusing the meeting on your behalf. Do you want CleverMe Inc. his number so you can decline the invitation again personally, or shall I just mention our conversation in passing if he bothers me again? You can tell him, but if you know when it's going to be, tell me in advance so I can come over to your office and listen in. Snigger. You think I can somehow schedule the phone calls I get from these enters? More sniggering. We'd done with the actual work by then, so I gathered up my various belongings and made like a tree. As I reached the door, marketing assistant spoke again. Oh joy, she said. Yes, says I, turning round. Can your estate still claim back mileage allowance if you get murdered or go missing while on company business? I don't think so. I'd stay home if I were you. I will. You take care too. Leaf. It was quiet for the rest of the week. But while I was out and about on Monday, one of the secretaries took a message from someone called Smith, who was disappointed not to have met one of our employees at an unspecified location the previous Friday night. This of course got escalated. Having explained to my boss that, no, of course I hadn't made any such arrangement, and by the way, this ERP was what they were trying to sell us before I was asked to send a girl to a car park at midnight, I didn't ring back. I did receive a couple more phone calls over the next few months, before I ultimately persuaded Mr. Parkinson/Smith that further contact might be unwise and would definitely be futile. Crank the second. The phone rang, the tone it used for internal calls. I picked it up and announced myself. It was someone from marketing. Oh good, oh joy, I'm glad you're in. Can you come to a meeting in the boardroom now, please? Huh, what about? Why am I only being told now? How long for? Probably all day. Sorry in advance. What do I need? Nothing. Pen, paper maybe. You can borrow my laptop if there's anything worth using it for. You're coming now, yeah? I was, it seemed. So I pulled on my jacket, grabbed a pad of paper and set off at a brisk trot between buildings. It was probably grey and raining. Now we're all told, probably with a certain amount of good reason, not to make snap judgments. But first impressions do count, and sometimes there's a reason for them too. And in honesty, I'm usually pretty good at reading people when I meet in person. I disliked Crank 2 from the instant I met them, and was quite certain of it even before they'd slimed my hand. Crank 2 was a politically connected university professor. They spent their days doing badly designed and utterly meaningless research on how our industry's products affected disabled end users. This involved spending huge sums constructing machines that in no way simulated either the disability or the use of product. Garbage in, garbage out. But as long as the right people are made to look like money-grubbing villains, who cares? Crank 2's political sponsors were ruling party at this particular point in time, so their services were being foisted on the industry, who were also expected to foot the substantial bill they generated for wasting everyone's time. So I sat through a couple of hours of disjointed presentation. Along with the others present, I pointed out why the machines were useless, that product wasn't intended to be used that way, and that the end result was drivel. Crank 2 poo-pooed this and pointed out how impressed their political sponsors were. It might just have been my jaundiced eye, but each one of these 50k costing rigs looked distinctly like it had been thrown together from scrap, in a garage, over the weekend. Come lunchtime, and a hastily arranged buffet courtesy of the marketing department, I cornered someone from marketing, looking for explanations, and to be honest, some sort of hall pass for the afternoon, so I could go back to doing something useful and not be late home again. This shitty was all so bad that they had no problem shooting it down on their own. Engineering support not needed, someone from marketing explained. Crank 2 had simply turned up in reception mid-morning, announcing that they were going to make a presentation to all the marketing and sales personnel today. Now, reception was nonplussed, because they weren't expecting this. We use this thing called a diary, and Crank 2 wasn't in it. Also, most people who seemed likely attendees were out, doing customer things. You know, their jobs. So the receptionist rang someone from marketing. Fortunately, someone from marketing did know all about Crank 2, and the backstory, and the connection to ruling party, so they quickly determined Ziz Inc. were going to be stuck with a wasted day for several senior staff. If we didn't drop everything and entertain Crank 2, then their political sponsors would make sure we suffered for it far worse down the road. Grin and bear it. Splendid, says I, but what do you need me for? You and X person and Y person are obviously perfectly capable of shooting down this BS on your own. So someone from marketing explained more and nastier details. I might have mentioned that I immediately disliked Crank 2. Even before I saw their work, they gave off strong vibes of being both a crook and a quack. And a creep. Someone from marketing confirmed the last for me. There was history, not that they knew, or at least related, the details. It turns out that, unbeknownst to me, Ziz Inc. had a f-king company policy to the effect that no female employee was to be left in a room alone with Crank 2 at any time, for any length of time. No exceptions. And yes, Crank 2's political cover was that good. I looked over at Crank 2 with a renewed revulsion. Needless to say, on this particular day, all of the denizens of both sales and marketing who happened to be present were also female. The afternoon was much the same shitty show, and finally trailed off into nothingness. Then Crank 2 announced that they had a flight to catch and had made no arrangements to get themselves back to the airport from Ziz Inc. Someone rings down to reception and asks them to book a taxi. The receptionist rings back, they can't get one fast enough. Lady sales rep, who was a newer hire than me, and also therefore had to be brought up to date on the history/policies at lunchtime, and I exchanged glances. Lady sales rep wound up driving Crank 2 to the airport in her company car while I rode shotgun. Then she got to drive back through rush hour traffic to drop me off again. I have actually met worse people than Crank 2, but not as well connected, and I don't think I've ever been more thoroughly disgusted either. I had to deal with Crank 2 a couple more times over the ensuing years, but I suppose at least forewarned. Before anyone asks, ruling party was still in power when I left Ziz Inc. So I honestly can't tell you whether Crank 2 ever had their political cover withdrawn. The everlasting Crank. Crank number 3 was a perennial. By the time I took over Enter Patrol, They had already accumulated a file 2 inches thick. They too had history. In the time before I worked there, IP was looked after by embittered specialist. Way back in the before, when even new boss, remember them, was a new hire. They, new boss, had been mailed a series of exciting concepts by an independent designer/inventor. Embittered specialist had been dispatched on new boss's orders to meet with the inventor and explore these concepts. The inventor was Everlasting Crank. Embittered specialist had traveled a considerable distance and then been taken to tea in a department store cafe where their host had flirted continuously and unsuccessfully with the wait staff. Embittered specialist had been unimpressed by the crayon drawings proffered. Embittered specialist was then annoyed, but unsurprised, to find they were paying the bill. Embittered specialist returned to the office somewhat, and permanently, disappointed in new boss. Embittered specialist also harbored a minor concern that the waitstaff at department store cafe hadn't been appraised of the fact that it was a business meeting, and might therefore think embittered specialist was somehow related to Everlasting Crank. When I started, embittered specialist was this close to retirement, so I got into patrol duties fairly early on. "Here's the files," said embittered specialist. "You'll note Everlasting Crank has one all of their own. No one specific tale here, just a recurrent modus operandi. I got mailings/faxes from Everlasting Crank every few months. These would typically run to between 40 and 60 pages, mainly comprising material they'd previously sent, but with revised order and page numbering. Always included was a staggeringly onerous, and legally dubious, confidentiality agreement, which had occasionally been pre-signed by Everlasting Crank on our behalf. With this was the now inevitable money order for 1 penny, of which Ziz Inc. had a startlingly large collection for $1 billion multinational. We were supposed to cash this as part of our acceptance of the confidentiality agreement. We didn't. Everlasting Crank was much perturbed by this. In addition to direct mailings, we also sometimes heard from Everlasting Crank's elected representatives. This happened every couple of years and always followed the same narrative. Elected representative would write us a starchy and somewhat unpleasant letter on posh-looking headed paper, and accuse us of ripping off their constituent and costing said constituency jobs and investment. What were we going to do about it? Nothing. Except waste yet more time explaining to elected representative that no, we hadn't agreed a multi-billion investment with Everlasting Crank, and no, nothing they'd proposed would work, and no, they didn't have all those patents. And then proving it, lest there be any doubt. One of the other things Everlasting Crank did was mail me bunches of their rejection letters. I don't know why, and it did seem that Everlasting Crank thought their own confidentiality agreement didn't apply to them, despite having been the only person who actually signed it. But I read the letters through and filed them away. My opposite number at PQR Holdings had quite the turn of phrase when writing back. I imagine they also got copies of mine. So I hope those likewise provided them with lunchtime joy. The trouble is, Everlasting Crank appeared to regard all these communications as positive. Actually, there is a story, just a short one. One day, I get a manila envelope from Everlasting Crank in the mail. A surprisingly thin one on this occasion. Everlasting Crank had determined that their ideas might have a military application, and therefore submitted them to British Admiralty. Those folks in charge of the Royal Navy, you know the ones. Everlasting Crank was having difficulty with the reply, and wanted Ziz Inc. to interpret it and intercede with the military brass on their behalf. Now, I'm sure everyone reading this has received a rejection letter or two. You might well have written some. They vary through genuine and almost helpful, several kinds of generic to sarcastic and / or passive aggressive. But they've got nothing on the Admiralty, nothing. The letter ran, approximately, as follows. Dear Everlasting Crank, I confirm receipt of your letter of the date 1B 4C 17. Yours sincerely, Lieutenant Commander Smith, Staff Officer to Admiral Jones. To decrypt this, you will be needing the code book. Fortunately, the Admiralty have thought of this, and printed it in 4-point text on the back of letter. It runs to several thousand words. Equally fortunately, Everlasting Crank's voluminous photocopying operation has handily included a copy of the reverse side. It's all in numerical order, you just have to run down. Basically ladder logic pseudocode for letter writing. Okay, Brace yourselves, here we go. 1. You refer to previous correspondence, and 1b, we don't have any. I therefore have no idea what you are talking about. 4. We have examined your submission, and 4c, we don't have the faintest f-king clue why the FCK you think it might interest us. 17. You, 17er, appear to be some kind of nut. Please leave us alone in future. I might have paraphrased that just a little. Confidentiality agreements mean I'm writing this years down the line and don't have a copy in front of me, but you get the idea. I still a minor ambition to reduce my personal correspondence to this level, but so far I've only got to the point putting subject to alteration without notice on Christmas cards. I should probably get them specially printed next year. Zizink. Declined to get involved in everlasting cranks communications with the military. Thank you. Next. Going to try and keep this as short as possible. I'm usually pretty calm but this one irked me a little bit. $user comes into my office and asks me to help her attach a document to an email from a flash drive. $user. $Sansi4. I need you to help me attach to an email from my pen. Yes, she referred to a flash drive as a pen. $Sansi4. Okay, get yourself logged in and I'll show you. At this point, I'm already feeling frustrated because I've already shown this person how to attach stuff to emails more times than I care to remember, but here we go again. She gets logged in and signs into her online Virgin email client. $Sansi4. Okay, click the paperclip and click on your pen drive name. Find the file you want to attach, click it, and then click send. She faffs around for a bit trying to figure out which file she wants because there are multiple files all with the same name, numbered such as your file. 7. She finds the one she wants and clicks it, attaching the documents to the email. $user. Okay, now how do I send? $Sansi4. Just click your send button, wherever that may be on Virgin email. $user. Oh, I don't know where that is. You're the expert. You just do it for me. I take her mouse and scroll down on her unmaximized window and click send. I sit back down at my desk wondering how I ended up doing such menial tasks for such unthankful people. Thank you. Next. Hello robots. Thanks for the ups on the last post. This tale happened to me this morning and I couldn't go to sleep without posting it. SPL0. Me. User. Person in question. I work as a entry-level help desk technician. At my place of employment we utilize Active Directory for password resets and looking up user information. Today, as all our /talesfromtechsupport stories start, I received a phone call with a basic question. User, hello, good morning, my password expired and I was wondering how I could change or reset it because I need to do blah 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 and get work done and it expired blah 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 blah, so now I need to reset it, so blah blah. Endless looping of reasoning and rants. However, I am pleased to say that today the user simply said, hi, my password expired and I was wondering how I reset it. I appreciate the point calls and I am not demeaning this person. It's what comes after that genuinely shocks me. I can't even label it computer illiteracy. I am having trouble labeling it actually. Here is the transcript of the call. SPL0. Sure, I can reset your password. Can you just provide me with your domain username? User. Yes, my domain username is 1/7/2020. SPL0. Okay. Can you just verify some information for me? User. Verifying info beep boop. SPL0. Okay, I have reset your domain password to 12,345,678,911. User. Thank you so much. SPL0. Is there anything else I can assist you with today? User. No, but I have a question. SPL0. Sure, how can I help? User. I am asking for my friend because he is having a similar issue with his password being expired and I was just wondering how to go about getting your password reset. SPL0. Didn't we just do that? Sure, just have your friend call us, verify his information and we can reset the password. User. Thank you so much, I will let him know, have a good day. SPL0. You as well, goodbye. TL. Doctor. Guy calls for password reset. Asks how to do it for a friend. Thank you. Next. Another story from my 11 years doing first then second line in my local hospital. I see several members here talking about time in IT in hospitals. Maybe there's a reason hospitals attract funny/stupid/crazy calls. Disclaimer. Most of my stories come from management or back office staff. Very rarely do I have bad ones from the nurses. Sure, they log lots or really simple calls, but I've always put it down to office staff have a primary function that requires a computer. Nurses don't. Their primary function is to look after the patient and use a computer second. So I usually forgive computer illiteracy for that reason. But this was just one of those funny ones I thought I'd share. Anyway, to the story. So I got a call from a ward sister, head of the ward, saying that $midwife's mobile phone didn't work. Hospital supplied Nokia thing as midwives spend a lot of time away from the office at patients' homes. $midwife could call out, but they almost always couldn't call her. Sometimes they could, usually when phoning her back straight away. I tried calling the number and it didn't connect. Told them to bring the phone into us. Ward sister was fairly clued up and her staff rarely needed us unless it was an actual issue, so it must be an actual issue. Midwife brought it in and while she was there I called her phone and it connected. Tried a few things and every time it connected. I couldn't figure out what was causing it before but wasn't now, so I did a factory reset and tested it again and it still worked, and sent her away and to let me know if when it happens again and bring it straight in. She goes away, then the next day she's back, and yet when we tested it works fine. The ward sister demands it get sorted straight away and I can understand that, so I replace the phone with a new one, back when we could afford new ones, and set it up for her, and she goes away happy. I put the phone down to test later, annoyed that she didn't bother to bring the charger back as well, but oh well. Next day she comes back, new phone is having the same issue. The only thing that was the same between the old and new phones apart from the midwife obviously was the SIM card. So it must be the SIM card. I swapped the card for a new one and let ward sister know the new number as it would take too long to get it transferred. All sorted, away she went, and she came back that afternoon. Broken again. Now hang on a minute. I have her show me exactly what she does with the phone, and after a while we get to the cause. She explains that after she's made a call she puts it to sleep to save the battery as she didn't have a charging cable. She was just turning it off after using it. I politely explained to her to leave the phone on, and everything will work fine. And just to add an extra level of "are you kidding me?" she asks for a charger. I ask where the one that came with it was. She takes the box out of her bag and hand it to me. See, no charger. I continue as politely as I can, but I'm sure veins were starting to burst on my forehead. She should charge it using the cable that was in the box under the little piece of cardboard. It was annoying as hell at the time, but it's now one of my favorite stupid stories. Thank you. Next. LTL. FTP. Hi. I work for a SaaS streaming media company which targets mainly less tech-savvy users, where I used to be the support team lead. The vast majority of users I dealt with were a joy, and were great to work with even when they were being silly. However, some users were, for lack of a better term, terrible to deal with. Let's meet our characters. Me, at the time of the story, a fresh-faced apprentice ready to save the world. Manager, my direct line manager, who has been training me and helped me with some user issues. Karen, completely insane client. TLDR, Karen pays $100, wants $30 refund, and we aren't sure why. 3 months pass and she is still requesting this refund, which she doesn't get. For context, our service provides several add-ons, such as mobile phone apps. These are charged at $15 per month each. Karen has these apps on her account, and overall is pretty happy with them. A couple of years ago we released a new version of our app service, making the ones that Karen had legacy. Our company decided that if you wanted to upgrade your app service, it's going to cost you $50 per app, as a one-time fee. Karen hears about this, and decides to upgrade her apps, which our system tells her will cost her a total of $100. She accepts, and we get our money for the upgrade. Shortly after, the apps have been upgraded. Let's now get on to the nearly 3 months of debate this sparked to explain to Karen what just happened. The following conversations happen over our ticketing system. Karen, I just got charged $100 and I don't know why and I am very upset about it. Me, In my best customer service tone, "I'm sorry to hear that, Karen. It looks like on your billing profile you chose to upgrade your apps." I then explained that it's a one-time fee of $50 per app etc, and she should have been made aware of that before she clicked the button to confirm. For clarity, there's at least 2 confirmation buttons and a couple of checkboxes to complete. You are not supposed to be able to do this by mistake. That's when Karen drops something that still confuses me to this day. "Karen, this is disgusting. I want my $30 back." Me, "Are you referring to your monthly payment for the apps? If so, I'm sorry but I can't refund this as that's your monthly subscription. If you wanted a refund for this I would have to cancel the service." Karen, "No, I was charged an extra $30 for my apps when I shouldn't have." At this point, I felt it was a good idea to consult with my manager just in case I was missing something. Manager confirms what I have found. Karen just got charged for the upgrades and hasn't been double billed or anything like that. I go back to Karen. Me, "I'm sorry Karen, I can't find the extra $30 charge you mentioned. You were actually charged $100 but this was for the upgrade. Have you noticed this on your bank statement at all?" Karen, "This is ridiculous." Huge rant about how incompetent I am. I demand a refund. At the time, our company was trying to build a good reputation so we would probably have considered a refund in this case just to keep Karen calm and quiet. However, manager wasn't backing down. "We've not done anything wrong here and Karen needs this explaining in more detail." So, I do as any good apprentice would and write a huge email just explaining everything in excruciating detail. I was really eager to help Karen figure this out despite the name calling, because I quite liked my job. "Karen, you are clearly an idiot. Give me my $30 back and get someone who isn't shit at their job to fix this now." This went on and on in loops for months. We offered countless refunds for the apps, $100, but no, she wanted her $30 back. Looking back, we still don't know what she was talking about. She never got a refund, but Karen kept her apps and is still a user of our service to this day. Thank you. Next. FTP. I recently got a job working at $Hospital's IT service desk after completing an internship with $Hospital last fall. This short story took place a month or so into my internship. $RAU. Random administrative user $me. Me. Phone rings. $me. Service desk, this is $me. $RAU. Hi $me. This is $RAU and I'm having problems with desktop icons opening up. $me. Okay, tell me what's going on. $RAU. I click on the icon and nothing happens. $me. Do they show up on the taskbar at the bottom of your screen? $RAU. Yes, but they don't appear on my screen. At this point I have no clue why the apps won't open, but I have one more question before I ask a coworker for help. $me. $RAU. How many monitors do you have at your desk? $RAU. 2. $me knowing what's about to come. $me. Okay, are both of the monitors turned on? $RAU. No, one of them is off. My hand slowly makes its way to the back of my head. $me. Go ahead and turn that other monitor on. $RAU. Okay. Oh, there it is. I feel so stupid and I'm sorry I called. $me. It's okay. That's what we're here for. Hangs up phone and slams head on desk. Let me know if anyone has any feedback on the layout or spacing because I wrote this on mobile.